and for all that you have taught her and you do in her life, and just for her willingness to come and to share with us. We just pray this will be a meaningful time, both for her and for us, as we get to listen to her and talk together about how we can be better anticipating and leading upstream. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, let me say two things. First of all, first is that I'm not an expert, but I'm just wired for this. I'm always looking, okay, where are we next year? Where are we the year after? What happens if somebody has a heart attack? What happens if somebody burns a building? I mean, I'm wired that way. But I'm not wired that way as a person who is anxious about it. I'm curious about it. What happens if? And then when I got this book, Upstream, it was part of my Michael Hyatt reading club. And some of my notes are actually going to come from that. I find that just invaluable. And especially in what I don't know. I'm always interested in what don't I know yet. And Upstream is, how do we solve problems before they happen? The book is by Dan Heath, who's written a lot of other things. But the first thing is that I'm no expert in this field. All right. The second thing is, this is how we're going to format this. I'll probably do 10 minutes and then we'll go to a breakout. And depending on how engaged you are, it'll be a 5 or 10 minute breakout, somewhere in there. Then we'll come back. And if it's been something that either David or I think would be helpful for one of you to say, hey, share what your group talked about, then we'll have you share that. Then we'll do another couple minutes, go back to breakout. So it's going to be quite interactive. Okay? So put your jogging shoes on and let's go. Okay, in a way, all leadership is about one thing. It's pushing forward into the uncertain future and taking other people with you. Okay? The trouble with uncertainty, as we found out this year, is a lot of times there are problems that we haven't even thought about. So that kind of compounds things. So Heath's hypothesis is that we often get stuck by responding to problems. So you're going along, all of a sudden there's a problem, and there's like, everybody takes care of the problem, right? Or you get sidetracked. And, if it's in a stream, it's like the problems come downstream, and we're there, we're trying to fix things downstream. And the name of his book comes from, what if we went upstream, and we're prepared for what's coming toward us, as much as we can do that, and then had some systems or had something in place so that everything doesn't take us by surprise. Okay, so I really recommend his book, and you'll have a link to borrow that from, you can do it either from your public library. I'd recommend having it in your arsenal as you talk to your board and so on. But Heath is using real-world examples of how leaders turn conventional thinking on its head to eliminate problems at the root. Okay? So all of us are going to face problems. But the best leaders wade upstream and get rid of as many as possible so that their people can focus on what they do best. And for us, that's ministry, providing value to the church, providing value to the world. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is I'll kind of move through the chapters. It's a very natural flow in the book. And he starts with an example. He says you're at the side of a stream, and all of a sudden a kid, is in the water, and he's floating by and, can't swim. Well, you dive in, and you grab the kid, you rescue them, and you go like, solve that. And then all of a sudden there comes another kid, and you jump in again, and there comes another, and another one. It would be so much easier if you went upstream and found out, why are those kids falling in the water? Okay, so that's the premise of it, is let's move upstream and focus on prevention. So we attempt to solve the issues before they exact a cost on what God's called us to do. Okay? When you spend years responding to problems, and I think this is true for ministers, you can sometimes overlook the fact that you could be preventing them. Downstream efforts are narrow and fast, and you can see, we solved that. But upstream issues are broader, they're slower, and they're hazier, but when they work, they really work. And this is a quote from the book. So here's some questions. Why do you think it's so easy to react to problems than focusing on preventing them in the first place? What do you think?
I'll jump in there and prime the pump here, Rosemarie. I think one reason is because the problems downstream, for the most part, everybody can agree on. They see it. They see the kid in the water. You save the kid. You're a hero. Everybody's on the same page. But when you start going upstream and saying, oh, we should really adjust this and make it safer so kids don't fall in, then you have people saying, well, it's a hoax and I don't need a mask. Sorry, I got confused. But anyway, but in the same way, like with COVID, when you're not actually having the issues and you're trying to prevent things, then people argue about the effectiveness of it, the reality of it. But downstream, everybody can agree because there's an emergency. If that makes sense to everybody, what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so some actions to consider are consider upstream thinking. If you've been focused primarily on problems, open your mind to the idea that you might be able to move upstream and do something about them. All right, here's another thing. Declare your agency. Determine where do you have, when and where you have the power to investigate and attack problems at the cause. We as international church pastors don't always have enough cultural information to know something's abnormal, to know something's off, whatever. But find out, where do you have the power to prevent things? And then examine your reaction. If you're continually reacting to problems, start to examine what's upstream that's causing these issues. Whether it's a person, whether it's a kind of event, whether it's something that seems random to you, whatever, okay? So from that, just saying that some things are preventable, and you might be the one to stop it, what keeps us from seeing this? Well, first of all, he says problem blindness. Problems are always there. It's just that sometimes you can't or you won't see them. So how does the system that you're working in causing problems? And one of the things that I underlined it every time I read it was, every system is perfectly designed for the results it gets. All right, your system, if you have something systemic that's happening over and over, it's because your system is channeling things that way. And the escape from problem blindness, this is another quote, begins with the shock of awareness that you've come to treat something abnormal as normal. Okay, so I want to ask you some more questions. Actually, let's do a breakout with this. And these are the two questions. In your business or your life, what problems have you come to accept as normal? Okay. So what problem is normal for you? And from the ones that you're experiencing, how much control do you have over it? And, have you questioned that problem? Okay, do you have control over it? Have you questioned it? So here are the two questions. In your business or life, what problems are you accepting as normal? And then second, how much control do you have over that thing? And have you ever questioned that? Okay, so let's go to breakouts and we'll see how, is Michelle there to put us into breakouts?
Yes, I am here. Your breakout room will be ready if you tell me.
Okay.
Go for it.
We'll give you 5 minutes for sure, so talk fast, and if you're really engaged, we'll give you more. So sometimes it isn't your responsibility to respond, but that doesn't mean you can't take ownership and in doing so change the world. So you have to volunteer to go upstream. Okay, there's nobody going to go like, you know, if you had done planning like that, people are responders. So leads, nobody will. Okay, and you're going to choose to fix this problem not because it's demanded of you, but because you can and because it's worth fixing. Okay, so in your experience, why do some problems lack owners, and what's the effect of this lack of ownership?
One of the things I've noticed with the pandemic is why did because it can just be so overwhelming for some people, they just disengage. So, you know, it's one thing too many. There's already a load of pressures in their lives. And, you know, to then think about this. And so it's not like, oh, it's either a problem blindness, which could be in all of us, of course, or it's just rather not think about it, hope it will go away. And I think there can be an element of that, you know, and I think there was certainly some of that. Some people that I know initially in this pandemic, oh, it'll be gone in a few weeks' time, you know, and you know, this whole going online digitally as a church, we don't really need to think about that. It's just a temporary fix, and rather than it's a permanent change and also an opportunity. So.
Yeah. So when we're looking at ownerless problems, it's good to identify them. Really take some time to think about problems in your organization and keep track of which ones are not being solved. Okay? Examine your ability. Think about what harms you've accepted just as doing business as a church or just as being the pastor. And spend some time thinking about what you might be able to do to correct that. Okay, and then own the problem. You're the leader. Take ownership of a problem and make it yours to solve. And whether you do what Andy was saying and get somebody really competent on it, okay? When I did this in our church, and we'll talk a little bit more about that quickly, but when I did this, I just looked at who has expertise. Okay, are you willing to pick this part up? Yeah, okay, sure, I'd love to. Okay, I had 3 or 4. I had a doctor take the health stuff. I had somebody who lived in the Middle East take the security stuff, and I can't remember what the other one is. I didn't write it down here. But, you know, I'm just thinking I'm no expert. You know, so just forget it. I'm not good at this. Let me give it to somebody who's good at it. All right? But I own the problem. Somebody has a heart attack in my service, it's my responsibility to put a system in as their leader to have something that, you know, can help, or to know who do we call, and to have people at the back who can, you know, call an ambulance or whatever. Those are things that I don't have to do, but they're my responsibility as a leader. The third thing is tunneling. Okay, so you know, I'm going to send you to a breakout for this. Have you ever dealt with a problem for years only to find a simple solution that makes everything better? And think about what it is. And then I want you to think about, and I'm going to put these questions in the chat, by the way, so you can go back. What problems are you avoiding right now? Just because it's easier to avoid them, but how might solving them free you up to do what you're called to do? All right, off we go into breakout rooms.
Where are you?
That was fast.
I know it does go fast. Okay, I put the next questions in the chat already because I didn't realize that you couldn't see them when you're in the chat, which is not helpful for me to post them if you can't see them. Okay, so to prevent these things, give your people a role. Identify who's best suited for each part of the problem and empower them to act, and then let them go. Encourage them to believe that they can make a difference. Okay, that they have a real part to play and that they have authority to carry it out. So really encourage them and personalize the problem. Make it about making their lives or their work better. You know, if it doesn't matter to them, they're not going to work very hard on it. Okay, so many times the problems that we face are a direct result of the systems in which we're operating. So a lot of that, let's face it, is inherited. Unless you're the church planter, you're getting stuff, right? And that's just the thing. I mean, that's not a bad thing. That's not a, you know, it's all it is it's a thing. Okay. And so, it's really important to do the upstream work that's about reducing the probability that problems will happen. So you have to change the system because the systems are the source, or at least they're the conduit for problems. Okay, to change the system is to change the rules that govern us. And what this means is that sometimes we have to go in with a fresh set of eyes. One of the fresh set of eyes are younger people. They a lot of times can see problems we haven't even noticed. All right, my media team sat down last week and went like, nobody under this age is ever going to watch blah 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 from this time period. I'm like, that's over. Let's design something in the future that they'll watch. How are you going to do that? And they're like, right? Okay, if they brought the problem up, same thing with theology. If you have this ongoing theological conversation that's wrecking your church, put them to work researching. Okay? Make the people who perceive the problem work on it with you. And we do that all the time as academics. So you kind of have to identify your water. What's happening that's bringing things downstream? And do that from a different perspective. Maybe go on the opposite bank or so on, okay? And ask for input. And also note some system failures, okay? And brainstorm what is causing this downstream failure. I've asked Waldemar to duck in to tell us a few things about what we need to have in place for security, all right? For security and for media. So this is like a little bonus. Waldemar, you've got probably 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
All right, just to give them a total heads up on techie stuff. And you guys might want to take some notes for this.
Okay, so how many of you are already using VPNs and are familiar with that and are VPN users? Okay, so I don't need to refresh that. How many of you are already using some sort of a password manager, like LastPass or something like that? 2 people? Okay. LastPass is what I highly recommend for a number of reasons. Number 1, it's free. Number 2, it's something that will run on a lot of different platforms. So you can run it on your Android, your iPhone, your PC, your Linux box, your Mac. And what it is it's a repository. It's really very, very secure, which will let you store all your passwords. It will not only let you store your passwords, but it'll also run an audit for you of a couple of different things. One is how many times you're reusing the same password. That's death on the current internet. Because if you're using a password, for something that's fairly trivial, that you also use for your main banking or something important like that, that's a bad thing, because if somebody figures that out, they can get in and be you. And you don't want that happening. So LastPass is free. I use LastPass for a lot of stuff. It will automatically generate passwords for you. It will run an audit for you of how many times a password has been used in different sites. And then in many cases, it can go in and automatically change your passwords and then store that into the repository. The way LastPass works is this. You need to remember one password. That's the password that gets you into LastPass. And I would suggest something that's, it doesn't have to be all that complicated. You know, like it could be a phrase like, "We are all now here." That's not mine, okay? So that won't get you into my repository. But choose something that you'll remember. It doesn't have to be something exotic with weird letters and numbers and symbols, but it should be something that a dictionary search won't just pop up, you know? And once you remember that, it gets you into LastPass, and then LastPass will sign you in to the different places you go. It'll generate secure passwords for you. You can tell it, I want 12 characters. I would suggest that you do easy to read, so it won't put in ones and lowercase l's, okay? So it won't put in numbers and characters that are easily confused, zeros and O's, ones and L's, and stuff like that. And it'll just generate for you a password for each different site. It can also go out there on the internet, because there are certain places where you can search to see whether your identity is out there and compromised. It can go out and search those places for you and tell you, by the way, this password you're using, it's out there. You might want to change it. And so I do this periodically. Here's something else, and this is kind of grim, but I think it's really important. I have created a secure note in LastPass, and Rosemarie and I share the same LastPass repository, because she goes into Facebook and I go into Facebook. Then I simply identify Facebook, my initials, Facebook, her initials, and then we know which one to log in from. But I have a note out there that says, "In the situation of my death, open this." And it's a thing in there that lists all the different bank accounts. And of course, all of those bank accounts are also in LastPass, so you can log in. With all of this information, if something happens to me, we dropped our daughter off at the airport last night in Jakarta, and it's about a 3-hour drive back. And for some reason, our driver seemed to think that he was Mario Andretti or Lewis Hamilton or somebody like that. And so I was praying along the way that I would arrive alive. And I did. So Rosemarie isn't opening that file right now. But the thing is, with that file information, she can get in. She doesn't have to wait for probate to be able to access accounts that, you know, predate us and just have my ID on them and stuff like that. So there are a variety of things you can do with this, but I strongly suggest this. Keep yourself safe. Anytime you're in a coffee shop, anywhere that's public, I can sit in a coffee shop with my computer and watch everything anybody is doing unless they're on a VPN. There's software out there that lets me just absolutely watch every single keystroke that you are generating on your machine without you giving me permission to do so. And so, you know what? Use a VPN, protect yourself, use something like LastPass so that you've got everything stored easily and you're not reusing the same passwords. And yeah, those would be a couple of the big things I would mention. If you've got other questions, I'd be happy to interact with you. And
but do it privately, because we have got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Matt. Okay, so if you want to chat with Waldemar about security, the reason I asked him to come on is because most of us are not data gurus. If all of your information that you have on your staff gets hijacked by something. Have you ever thought of what could happen? Okay, even to have a LastPass for your inner staff and somewhere where you can get somebody out, or, you know, if something happens to you and nobody else has access to your accounts from the church, who's going to lead the thing?
Okay, let me mention one other thing since Rosemarie has just said this. And I teach a course on this use of technology and communication and worship and stuff like that. It does a lot of things, but I have an entire one-day session where I just deal with data security technology and stuff like that. There's software for Mac as well as for PC that lets me create a clone of my computer. Very, very easy to do on a Mac. It's a little bit more complicated on PCs because each of them are so different. But I can create a clone of my computer. I do it on a very fast drive, an SSD. If this computer that I'm using right now dies, all I have to do is pull out that drive and put it on pretty much any recent Mac in the world, boot up with the Option R key held down while it's booting, and I can then start from that drive, and I'm running everything on my computer as if I were on this machine. I can't tell you how much of a security blanket that is. I mean, yeah, you need backups and so on. Ransomware and all that kind of stuff is a really serious thing right now. If you aren't using antivirus stuff and so on, again, talk to me if you want some input on that. But I would strongly suggest that you make a clone of your computer and just keep it in a safe place. Update it every couple of weeks, so that if something dies, you haven't lost more than a couple of weeks of data, and you can be running within 2 minutes, which is very...
which email do you want them to use?
How about
put it in the put it in the chat.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and I highly recommend if something happens to your computer and you don't have the technical knowledge, just call Waldemar. He gets calls from all over the world. Okay, so I'm going to jump to 2 more things, and then we're going to wrap up. And if you guys want to talk more about this, you can either read the book or whatever. We're about halfway through what I was hoping to cover. But when you're doing things upstream, how do you know you're succeeding? Because a lot of the stuff is preventative, okay? Upstream problem solving takes time, and sometimes it takes years. So how can you identify the measures that will let you track, am I making any progress? All right, when we talk about things like computer threats, you know nobody's, you know, taken over our computer, we haven't been involved in any ransomware, that's a success. And it's easy to measure. But there are also things that we call ghost victories. Okay, that fool almost everybody, and especially if you're being successful. And there are 3 kinds of ghost victories right off the top. Okay? First one is you're succeeding, but it's not because of your work. All right? Maybe the tide is taking all the boats up. All the ICs are being successful in this area. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with the trend or something. Okay. Secondly, you're succeeding with short-term measures that don't really align with your long-term mission. So you're getting some short-term things, but they're not actually doing anything for the vision that God is giving you for that church. So you're going like, wow, look, we had a lot of people at the Easter egg hunt. They used to do that in Indonesia. I said, does anybody in Indonesia know what the eggs are about? And they're like, no, all the Americans are doing Easter eggs. I'm like, okay, pretend I'm Canadian. Gone. Axed. Why? Because it was successful. Everybody had fun. It brought nobody into the church. That's my long-term vision. Okay? So those, you succeed with short-term measures that don't align your long-term mission. The third thing is short-term measures become the mission. So all your volunteers are tied up in stuffing Easter eggs. All right? And they're so exhausted on Easter that they're not personally engaging. They're just shepherding the kids around the yard to find the eggs. All right? So it's a short-term measure that becomes the mission, but it undermines why are we celebrating Easter? That's a very, very basic one. Okay? Another thing that happens to get us off track is we're faced with a difficult question, so we default to an easier question without even noticing it. And we start to game the system. Okay, so the tide is rising for everybody, and we go like, oh, look at our numbers are up. This is up, that's up. We're asking the wrong question. Okay, or we're misaligned. The short-term measures aren't reliably predicting how successful we're going to be in our mission. Okay, so I just had a board meeting on Sunday, and I said to the treasurer, how are we doing? I had looked at the numbers, and I always let them present it. And he went, we are in great financial shape. We have X amount in the bank. And I said, great. Have any of you taken a look at the statement? We're not even covering salaries the last 3 months. We're running on reserves. Have any of you noticed that? Oh, really? Well, that's not very healthy. Okay, it's a short-term measurement. We have this amount of money. Ooh, we're in great shape. But what's happening month to month? What's the trend? Okay, so when you measure, don't game your measurements. You need really accurate data that's actually helping you. Sometimes we're kind of lazy. We want to think, you know, what can we do with the least effort? But you have to define your mission. How are you becoming successful? What is actually really working to build the kingdom of God and the things that God has called you to do? All right, I'm going to wrap up with this. Every time you change something, you change more than the one thing. Okay? Introduce bunnies to Australia, and all of a sudden you have to introduce dogs to catch the bunnies. Okay? Look once, twice, 3 times. What can you undo if it's not working? If it's not something that you can go back downstream or go back upstream and undo, you might have to take a look or two to make sure that you actually are not going to do more harm than good. Okay? And so some things to ask about harm are, have they tried a similar intervention? Can we start a small scale trial? All right. What kind of closed feedback loops can we do on part of this so that we get our response really quickly? And especially, can the upstream stuff be reversed or undone? And if it's no, use caution. Okay, I'm going to put you into groups, and this is the question that I want you to ask each other, and we're just going to give you 5 minutes, so be quick, and then we'll just wrap up, okay? What have you tried that has had unintended consequences? And how did you deal with that? How did you get back on track? What did you try that got you, weren't expecting this, either in a good way or harmful way, and how did you get on track or stay on track? All right, so you have 5 minutes. Oh, yeah, that was just crazy. I mean, I pressed end the Zoom or end the breakout rooms to bring you back like usual, and I don't know what I did, but my apologies about that. See, you guys are so quick. I just hope everybody else hops on. So I think you just touched on things. You were just getting started. All right. So in the chat, I had it typed in on the other one, but I'll type these into our chat so you can catch them again. When we work upstream, we want to be impatient for action, but patient for outcomes. Remember, when you're working out upstream, it takes time. Second thing, macro changes, big problem solving, takes time, and it starts with small changes. Okay, so start the big things with small things. My apologies as you're coming back. Sorry about that. Must hit the wrong thing. Okay. And then the third thing is don't obsess about testing. Continually change. We have the voice of the Spirit. When we're sensitive to the Spirit, and He will alert us if we take time to listen and meditate on the Lord and look at all these different things. What could happen? And what could we do to make it better downstream? Okay? And then finally, as a leader, you have the privilege of changing the organization that you work from the inside out. And I encourage you to do that, to line it more and more with the work that the Holy Spirit is trying to do in your IC. All right? And it's a great book, Upstream by Dan Heath. All right? Thank you very much, you guys. We're praying over you. You're the leader right there.
Well, thanks so much, Rosemarie. In just a minute, we'll have a time of prayer. And I know some of you only had 1 hour for this. So if you need to go, you're welcome to go on and go now. Don't feel bad at all. If you would like to stay around and we'll pray for each other for 10 or so minutes, then please stay on. But before we do that, any other last comments or questions for Rosemarie or the group? I know we got cut off in the middle of our breakout rooms. Anybody have any last thoughts they just really felt like they wanted to share?
No, apart from that was great. Thanks. So sorry, I have to depart. Oh, I'd gladly pray, but okay. Bye for now.
All right, take care, Andy.
Okay, bye.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to go too, I'm afraid.
Disappear as well.
Yeah.
If you want to just copy what's in the chat, go ahead and copy. That's kind of a review of the whole thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosemarie. Really appreciated that review and that input that you have with it. Blessings.
Amen to that.
And if you guys want the notes, I can gladly give you the notes. It's kind of a short version of the whole book. So if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think that'd be great if you could send that to Michelle, Rosemarie.
Okay, will do. I'll send her that file.
No, I think that was, yeah, it's good stuff. Some good conversation. I think like David Owen said at one point, it's almost too short. You're just trying to, there's so many good things. I know you have more to share. So, but I think it was stimulating. And
yeah, I think just to start the conversation is what we want, because a lot of us go from Sunday to Sunday or go week to week or month to month, and we just hope nothing happens.
Well, I think you're right about starting the conversation. We call this ignition. You know, we're trying to ignite something. We're not trying to give all the answers, but if we can help to ignite each other's thinking or to be a catalyst for something, you know, that's really great. And then conversations can continue. Like you said, they can call Voldemort. They can ask you questions. They can buy the book. But at least we're getting some new input, some fresh input. And I think for IC leaders, that can be tough when, I mean, it depends on who you are and how you're connected. But for many of us, if we're isolated, living, you know, not around other churches, you don't have that constant input that you might have in your home country if you had an association. And yeah, so I think this is really helpful. So thanks.